You notice that as I am working in the kitchen, I have an apron on. That's both to keep my clothes clean and also to keep any germs that might be on my clothes from getting onto the food. I've properly washed my hands for 20 seconds. I also have my hair tied back so that it's not going to fall into the food. How do you think we could divide our ingredients? Yes. Liquid and dry ingredients. Very good. The two categories of ingredients are liquid ingredients and dry ingredients. Okay. All right, so I'm going to start with the fats in my cookies, and I'm going to use two different kinds of fats, butter and shortening. Okay. My recipe just calls for a cup of butter, but that's quite a lot of fat, particularly saturated fat, because butter comes from animals that have saturated fats in it, and saturated fats are almost the worst fats you can have. So I'm going to replace half the saturated fats with unsaturated fats that you can get in vegetable shortening. So instead of a cup of butter, I'll do a half cup of butter and a half cup of shortening. How many of you have ever tried to scoop out shortening or peanut butter or molasses or syrup and it gets stuck to the cup and it's really frustrating and hard to get out? It's a big problem, right? There's something that you can do to minimize that problem, and that is to rinse the measuring cup in hot water. Particularly if you're using a plastic measuring cup, this works well. So you need to rinse your measuring cup in hot water. Does anyone have any ideas why rinsing the measuring cup in hot water would help oily stuff from sticking? What do you think, Ilya?
Maybe because it'll still be a little bit wet.
Okay, so the wetness prevents the oils from sticking. Why would water prevent oil from sticking? Kimberly?
Because oil and water don't mix.
Oil is hydrophobic. It does not like water. So if the measuring cup is coated in water, the oils can't stick to it. Okay? So it's going to be a lot easier to get out of the measuring cup if it is coated in water. Okay. There are 4 steps to measuring shortening. The first one is to rinse the measuring cup in hot water. The second one is to scoop the shortening out of the can. The third is to pack it into the cup. Shortening, if you just kind of scoop it in without packing, will leave air pockets, and you will not get an accurate measurement. Accurate measurements are very important, especially when baking. Okay, so rinse, scoop, pack, and finally we need to level the top so it's not bulging over the top of the measuring cup. Okay. When you level ingredients, it's important that you use the right tool. A lot of people will use the back of a knife, but most knives don't have a straight edge. Can you see how that's curved there? That curved edge means if I use that to level it off, I'm not going to have an accurate measurement because it's going to dip down in the middle. So the tool I'm going to use is a spatula. This is a spatula. So it will level the ingredients, and then it will be really easy to pull right out. I've added my shortening. Now I need to add my butter. Am I going to measure my butter the same way as shortening?
No.
Could I measure it the same way as shortening?
No.
Yeah, what if I had butter from a tub? It would be the exact same method as shortening. Okay, so the answer really is yes and no. You measure butter the same or differently from shortening depending on what kind of butter you're using. If it's in a tub, you measure it exactly like shortening. So each stick of butter is a half a cup or 8 tablespoons. And you can just cut on the line that is printed on the stick and use what you need. Since this is a half cup, I'm going to use a whole stick. Dump that in. All right, so now I have my fats in the mixing bowl. I'm going to add my sugars, and I'm going to use 2 kinds of sugars: brown sugar and white or granulated sugar. Okay. These 2 sugars have very different textures. Can you imagine feeling each one and how different they are? The brown sugar is kind of squishy and soft. The white sugar is kind of hard. Okay. So brown sugar, because it is soft and moldable and squishy, kind of like wet sand, it needs to be packed firmly into the measuring cup. Otherwise, you're not going to have enough brown sugar. And a product that doesn't have enough sugar in it doesn't taste very good. So we're going to pack this in so firmly that it retains the shape of the measuring cup, just like a sandcastle. Okay, that's how you know you've got enough brown sugar, if it retains the shape of the measuring cup. How does the texture of white sugar differ from brown sugar? Josh?
It's more dry.
It is drier. Anything else, Cindy?
Brown sugar is a little bit sticky.
Brown sugar is sticky. So white sugar is more like dry sand, where brown sugar is more like moist sand, right? White sugar does not compact. You can squish it however you will, but it's not going to change its shape or volume. So you don't need to pack it. There's no way to pack it, or then it will go. And you can level it off just like you do with other ingredients, but because of its crystal and granulated structure, you can also level by gently shaking the measuring cup. And then checking to make sure that that is level. I am going to turn my mixer on and let these ingredients cream together. That means they're going to beat really fast together until the texture is creamy. And turn the mixing bowl on really high so that it creams together. I need to add a couple of eggs to my recipe, but I'm not going to crack them right into the bowl. Okay? Why would you want to crack them into a separate bowl first? What do you think, Ian?
So the shells don't get in.
So the shells don't get in. Very good. What's the problem with the shells getting in?
It tastes really nasty.
Okay, shells could taste really gross. They also could cut your mouth up pretty good too. Josh?
Wait, do you have to crack on like flat surface?
Flat surface is usually easiest to not get shells in the mixture.
Yeah, that's what I did.
Yeah, you're right. Flat surface works a lot better for that. Okay, now that I've looked, I've got no shells in my bowl. It's important after you touch raw eggs that you wash your hands. So I'm going to step to the side and wash my hands again. I also need to add my secret ingredient for my cookies. I add vanilla pudding mix, instant pudding mix. It helps keep the cookies really soft and moist. Now I need to add vanilla. Have any of you ever smelled vanilla? Vanilla smells so good, right? Have any of you ever tasted pure vanilla? Does it taste as good as it smells? No. It is awful, awful tasting stuff. The reason it is because it is very concentrated. What does it mean to be concentrated? Josh?
It means like, so it just sticks to like one flavor, or like it's concentrated on one type of flavor.
Right, it's very, very strongly one flavor. They packed all the flavor into a very small amount of space. Because they do that with flavoring extracts, it's important that you measure vanilla or other flavorings so that spills do not affect the recipe. Okay. So I measured it over the counter and then moved it over the bowl. And I did not measure it right over the bowl in case I got bumped and extra vanilla fell into the bowl. That would be a problem. I have added all my liquid ingredients and my sugars mixed a little more evenly. And now I need to add my dry ingredients. How would you describe the consistency of flour? You described brown sugar as kind of like moist sand, white sugar as kind of grainy, dry sand. How would you describe the consistency of flour? Jonathan?
Pottery.
Powdery. Josh?
Extremely dry.
Very, very dry. Okay, so flour, if you clump it together in your fist, is it going to reduce volume? Can you pack it together?
Yes.
It does pack together. Brown sugar, with brown sugar, it's really nice to have it packed together because you need all the flavor you can get and you want that extra sugary goodness in your cookies. flour, if you have too much flour, your product is going to be dry, crumbly, bready, dense, not very nice when you're talking about a cookie. Okay, so flour is an ingredient that is often sifted. The purpose of sifting is to add air. Okay, how many of you own a sifter at home? Does that mean no one else can use flour because you don't own a sifter at home? I actually don't own a sifter at home. So there are 4 steps to measuring flour if you don't have a sifter. The first step is to cut your flour. So with 2 butter knives, you just slide them back and forth. And this begins loosening those particles, making sure the flour is not in clumps in the container. Really.
Like some people say it's bad to eat just regular cookie dough, like when it's not cooked. Is that how is that bad?
That is a very good question. It is because of the raw eggs. Raw eggs and any raw poultry is food that comes from birds, is prone to a disease called salmonella poisoning. And salmonella makes you very, very sick. So you take a risk anytime you eat anything with raw eggs. The way they get around that with things like cookie dough ice cream is they'll use cookie dough that has no eggs in it. Sometimes I crave cookie dough and I don't really care about the cookies, I just want the cookie dough. So I'll make just a small little batch, but instead of 2 eggs, I'll use 1/8 of a cup of milk. And you can do that. It won't bake up well, but it gets rid of your risk of salmonella poisoning from the eggs. So you can do that and get rid of that. That's a good question. Okay, so measuring flour, first step is to cut. Second step is to stir. So again, this is more loosening the particles, keep them from clumping. The third step is to very gently put it in the measuring cup. You notice I'm not using the measuring cup to scoop it all up from the container because that's just going to push all those particles back together. And we're going to end up with a very dry product. And last, we need to level the top with a straight edge. And I need to add one more dry ingredient, baking soda. That's going to help the cookies rise a little bit. It's a leavening agent. Okay. So, I need to add my flour and baking soda, my dry ingredients, gradually. What does it mean to add something gradually? Kimberly.
Starting with a little and then slowly building it up.
Okay, so a little bit at a time, very good. Why do you think I don't want to just dump the whole thing in there? Tasha?
It'll go everywhere.
It will kind of explode in a big floury cloud in my face, and I will not be able to breathe for the next 5 minutes. That's one thing, yes. Why else? McKenna? It will not mix evenly. You'll get big pockets of flour. I don't think anyone would like to bite into a cookie with a big pocket of flour. So I'm going to add this gradually. As I am adding this gradually, let's come up with some examples of dry ingredients. Sadie.
Baking soda.
Baking soda. Cindy. Flour. Titan.
White sugar.
White sugar. I have one more thing to add to my cookies. Any ideas? Ian?
Chocolate chips.
Chocolate chips. Chocolate chips have a definite shape, right? Unlike flour or sugar or brown sugar or shortening, it has a definite physical form that it stays in no matter what you do to it unless you melt it down. So when you're measuring ingredients like chocolate chips, you want to gently press down to level it off. So you just gently press down. Need more chips than that. To level it off. Because you're going to have airspace in the measuring cup with chocolate chips. There's nothing you can do about that unless you melt it down. But that kind of defeats the purpose of a chocolate chip cookie. Okay, so what would be some other ingredients that would be like a chocolate chip? They have a definite form, so you'd measure them the same way. Oats, yes. Jess. Nuts of any kind, yes. Lucas?
Raisins.
Raisins, yes. I did not have to measure any liquids in large amounts for my recipe, but sometimes you do have to measure liquids. What would be some examples of liquid ingredients that you might measure? Logan?
Milk.
Milk would be a liquid ingredient, yes. What else? Yes.
Water.
Water. Thank you. Yancy? Oil. So let's talk about how to measure. Liquid measuring cups and dry measuring cups are different things. Dry measuring cups and liquid measuring cups are calibrated just a little bit differently. So if you measure a liquid in a dry measuring cup, you will not have an accurate measurement. If you measure something dry in a liquid measuring cup, it won't be quite accurate. Because liquids and solids behave differently, they have to be measured a little bit differently. Okay? The two steps for measuring a liquid are placing on a flat, level surface and checking at eye level. Okay? So just to be clear, I don't care how steady your hand is, holding it up in the air is not a flat, level surface. It must be on a flat, level surface.